unfortunately, we come to the dark side of the interview, where we'll discuss sorry, about some of the polls that are continually brought up by the community.
Oh,
so, from this point on, everything you say will have a consequence. How about that?
Yeah, that sounds good. I'll put my serious face on.
Okay, let's continue. We talked about mouse dragging as a tool, right? But
yeah,
what about feints? I mean, many people are bitching about it being a broken mechanic, which is easy to abuse of. Do you agree with this statement, or you have a different opinion?
I agree to a certain extent. Well, I have to explain a bit first. Feints, to me, it's a mechanic to throw your opponent off balance. So you can actually hit him, because, a good player, he can block your attacks forever and forever and forever and forever, and that's just not fun. And I understand some community members when they say that a player with no skill can kill a rather good player with feinting. That is true. But the player with no skill can't read feints. That's where the skill cap is introduced. Most good players are pretty decent at reading feints, and I think it's important to have that in the game, because, well, it rises the skill cap. It's a higher skill cap. It takes longer to get good at the game, but it's more rewarding, and you can see the difference between a good player and a not so good player. And I really like that. But of course, there are some broken mechanics with feints. As you know yourself, one-handed weapons are extremely fast, at least some of them. So like an alt overhead with the North Sword, or, well, any attack with the North Sword, you can forget about reading a feint with the North Sword. It's just not possible unless they do a microsecond feint. And there are some other weapons that are similar. And even with two-handers, you also have the problem with the stabs, because we all know the stab, when you're standing in facehug range, they already collide with you. So when you release from the wind-up, you hit instantly. So if I feint until the last millisecond, how are you supposed to know if I'm going to hit you or not? Even if you try to wait, and even if you parry exactly when I release, it's still so close that I will hit you before your parry animation is up. It takes some time for the parry to actually have effect. And that is a big problem, I believe. So I've always had the idea that they should introduce like a shorter window to feint. You have the wind-up animation when you ready your attack, in which you can feint, but let's say you could only feint during, well, the first half of the wind-up. I think only that would solve a lot of the issues with feints. They would still be useful if you use them at the right moments, but you can't abuse them to kill anything. You can't take a rank 5 and let him kill a rank 40 with feint spams. And also the stab feints wouldn't be so hard to read, and it would sort out a lot of issues, I believe.
I think that it's also in the tutorial that they tell you that it is possible to avoid a feint by waiting till the last second. And this is proven to be wrong. I mean, if you wait till the last second, it's possible to receive a completely free hit. It's kind of difficult to wait till the last second of a heavy feinter.
Yeah.
Because it comes very unpredictable,
Yeah, I agree. As I said, well, with two-handers, it's quite possible if you have good footwork, and you're really playing your top game. Then I believe you could probably read any normal feint, except the stab feints. But with the faster weapons, and some weapons with somewhat broken animations, it's really hard. For example, you have the Grand Mace. It's not that fast, but the alt overhead with the Grand Mace is really hard to tell if it's a feint or not, because the animation is so weird. And that's the sort of things they need to balance out in the game, I think.
Are you familiar with the Sword of War?
Yes. The Sword of War, I like to use it, but sometimes I feel dirty when I use it, because it has really abusive animations, in my opinion.
I see a lot of knights abuse of this weapon stab. The counterattack, the stab counterattack, is very fast to read, it's very difficult, and it deals a lot of damage.
Yeah, it does. Well, I think if you didn't have the risk of getting feinted, it would be more manageable, but since you want to wait and check for a feint, at least to some extent, then yes, you do get hit sometimes, just because you waited a little while, and it's annoying because it's really fast. Generally, when someone is using the Sword of War against me, if I see him stab, I just move backwards. I start moving backwards the second I see him initiate his stab, because there's nothing you can do really. Either you take a chance that he's gonna feint you and you get hit, or you block and you get hit because he feinted. It's impossible to tell. It's what most of the casual gamers would call a gamble. They're complaining that feints is a gamble, and in these cases, it really is a gamble. Sometimes you can see your opponent, how he's moving and behaving, that he's gonna feint, but you can't always count on that. So, yeah, it's difficult.
It sure is. I mean, there is a certain tool that not many people use. That is footwork. You've mentioned that.
Yeah.
Most people tend to go backwards. When you're attacking, all they do is go backwards. Maybe you've experienced this yourself, so you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Because I think it's a normal reaction. You see someone coming and you just have to go back. It's something natural.
Yeah.
Do you have any strategy or newbie tip that you can give our viewers here, so that they can start to use it wisely and start playing in a different way?
Yeah, well, it kind of depends what situation you're in. If it's a 1 versus 1, or if it's like on a TO with multiple people. But I guess that first of all, if you're gonna fight someone, then don't start moving backwards, because he actually gets an advantage. Playing defensively in Chivalry really doesn't pay off. It's a mind game. It's really hard to get the concept right away, but when you're fighting someone, you have to establish some sort of dominance. Of course, you can trick him into believing you're defensive and all that, but I don't know. I think just moving all the time is very important. And not just moving backwards and forward, but actually moving around him, because it makes it harder for him to block. For example, he can't see your movements as well, your weapon movements, and it keeps him guessing more. And you can also use footwork to avoid a lot of attacks. I mean, you can avoid overheads, and you can avoid, well, almost any attack with proper footwork. But I think the most important part with footwork is when attacking, because how fast you hit an opponent. Early in the game it was all accelerations. If you wanted to hit someone, then you overhead him and accelerated, right? But recently, more and more players has found out that you can hit someone very fast by positioning yourself correctly and angling the attack correctly. And that, I think, is very, very important, both when you want fast attacks or delayed attacks. So the mouse dragging isn't really that important. The mouse drag, you use the mouse drag more to time the attack, but you don't accelerate it so much or de-accelerate it so much. It's more footwork and, as I said, angles. So I know you asked me for a tip to beginners. I can't really form one. I am not sure what I would say, but all I can say is that be on your move and try to get a flow when you're fighting. Experiment a bit. Don't just move backwards and forward. And if you're gonna fight someone, then don't backpedal. Don't move backwards all the time, because you will likely die.
I mean, it's a very natural reaction to combat, and I think that what you're saying to actually step out of the fight by pressing A or D to move one side or the other, it is very useful. I mean, many people have formed their playstyle in base of that movement.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very difficult to hit them, because you never know which side they're going to pick. So yeah, it's a very useful tip you gave there. You have to be proud of yourself. So let's pass to the term facehugging. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah. Well, it's basically when you're standing really close to someone, hugging his face.
How you defined it? I mean, does it really ruin the game, that they say?
No, I don't believe so. I think that if you don't want someone to facehug you, then you just have to move away. Most people do the mistake of backing away which is the opposite of what you want to do. If you want to get rid of a facehugger, you want to start sprinting and you want to strafe and move forward to his side to get around him. Because obviously if you're moving backwards, he can always run faster than you. And I don't think facehugging is that much of a problem because, of course, accelerated overhead heads and stuff hits faster, but it's hard to explain. I just gotten over it. I thought that when people facehug me with secondary weapons, you know, like falchions and Norse swords and hatchets and stuff, it was so hard to block the attacks. But after playing Chivalry so much, it's just a reflex to always turn towards the weapon tip and block it, so it doesn't matter if they're standing in my face or if they're standing 1 meter away. It's just a reflex anyway. And they also did some changes to that in the current beta patch, that it's easier to block attacks. You know, the one-handers, they won't angle around you that much anymore. Well, they do, but it's easier to block because I think the block collision model is bigger or something. I don't know. I just know it works better.
Yeah, I mean, this exploit, or let's call it, I don't know, bug, does give a certain advantage to specific classes. For example, the man-at-arms is very difficult to parry. I mean, if they got the falchion, it's impossible to parry. It's very difficult. It's very difficult. That weapon goes straight through the shields. I mean, it's a very bugged weapon in this patch, at least.
Yeah, I agree. I think it must be the hitboxes or something. You know, the tracer with the falcon, it's messed up. You know, I practice blocking that weapon, so I can block it pretty well. But you know, I don't block like I would assume I should block. You know, you see one thing and you want to block, but you have to do something completely different to actually block it. So it's more like something you learn and something you remember, but it's not very natural, so they should definitely fix it. But on the other hand, I also believe that man-at-arms, they are a very squishy class, and I've always found them to be weakest when they are in your face-hug range. That's because that's when you have the opportunity to deal damage. If you're trying to attack them further away, they will dodge away and you will miss. They go in and hit you and they keep repeating and repeating. When you have them in face-hug range, that's when you want to be aggressive and really punish them. I think it's the only opportunity you really have to, well, be really aggressive towards them. So sometimes when I'm against really aggressive man-at-arms and they come up to me and they start face-hugging me, it's a pretty easy fight. Sure, it's harder for me to block their attacks, but they can't block mine either, so...
Yeah, sure, it's a hit rate, right?
Yeah, no, I didn't just mean like that, but I meant like it's very hard for them to dodge away when they're at face-hug range. So usually when I fight man-at-arms, I just run up to them, you know, I really sprint towards them because they always tend to dodge backwards. But instead of hitting when I'm close, I let them dodge. I chase after them. When I'm starting to get near again, before they can dodge again, I just release my swing and hit them. You know, there's probably 100 ways of fighting man-at-arms, but I like having them in face-hug range. I really do.
And what if they carry a shield with them?
Well, I would probably bring out my secondary and try to hit around it. Of course, in a good situation, well, if the game was not broken, you would kick them, of course, you would feint and kick them. So,
do you consider shields to be OP?